People always talk about their wedding day like it's dipped in sunlight and gold, a memory preserved forever in laughter and love. I wanted that, too, more than anything. I used to picture it clearly, waking up to my mother's soft hands fussing with my hair, my father's gruff but affectionate teasing about how quickly I'd grown up, and my brother Adam making sarcastic little jokes to calm my nerves. But the reality was so different it almost felt like a cruel trick of fate. The morning of my wedding broke quietly, with pale sunlight slipping through the lacy curtains of my childhood bedroom in Charleston, South Carolina. The air smelled faintly of roses and gardenias, my mother's favorites, arranged in vases throughout the house. For a few blissful seconds, lying in bed, I let myself believe that the day would unfold the way I'd always dreamed. I imagined the kitchen alive with clinking dishes and chatter, my family bustling about, laughter echoing down the hallway. Instead, the house was silent, not peaceful silence, but hollow, unsettling, unnatural. I slipped on my robe and walked the hallway, my bare feet brushing the familiar wooden floors. I half expected to hear Adam's voice drifting from the kitchen, maybe catch my father with the morning paper and my mother humming to herself at the stove. But when I pushed open the kitchen door, I was met with nothing. The counters gleamed, the air was still, and on the marble table sat only one thing, a white envelope with my name scrawled across the front in my mother's looping script. My chest tightened. I picked it up with trembling hands, thinking it might be a note of love, encouragement, something to carry me into this new chapter of my life. But when I unfolded the letter, my heart plummeted. It was only one sentence. Let's see how you face the guests when we won't be appearing at your wedding. No signature, no affection, just coldness pressed into ink. The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I read it again and again, hoping I was wrong, but the meaning didn't change. My parents and Adam were gone. They had chosen not to be there on the most important day of my life. I dropped into one of the kitchen chairs, clutching the letter in disbelief. My mind spun through the possibilities. Maybe it was some elaborate joke? Maybe they'd walk in any second, laughing, telling me it was just their twisted way of surprising me. But the silence in the house was absolute. There would be no laughter. Some part of me wasn't shocked. My parents, Linda and Robert, had made their disapproval of William clear from the very beginning. His family was too different, too wealthy, too rooted in a world they thought didn't belong to us. Still, I had believed, naively, that love for me would outweigh their stubborn pride. I never thought they would abandon me so openly, so cruelly. The hours that followed dragged like years. I wandered from room to room, glancing at my phone, hoping for a message that never came. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a museum of everything I had lost. The needlepoint pillows my mother stitched, the photographs neatly arranged on the mantel, Adam's old baseball trophies lined up in the den. Everywhere I turned was a reminder that my family had chosen Paris, of all places, over me. I pictured them strolling along the Seine, sipping coffee as if today were just another day, while my wedding carried on without them. When Grace arrived, she found me on the staircase, the letter clutched in my hand, my eyes staring into nothing. She didn't pepper me with questions. She simply sat down beside me, sliding her hand into mine. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered. "You don't need anyone's permission to be happy." Her words were a lifeline I wanted desperately to believe. As the morning turned into afternoon, the house began to fill, heels clattering against the porch, voices spilling into the hall, trays of champagne glasses clinking as servers wove through the crowd. But despite the noise, I felt hollow, like a ghost drifting among the living. Grace stayed glued to my side. She helped me into my dress, her fingers quick and steady on the tiny buttons, her voice steady as she filled the silence with jokes. "If you trip on that train, just pretend it's a new dance move," she teased. "Who needs parents when you're marrying into a millionaire family?" she added with a wink, fluffing my veil. Her humor lightened the weight on my chest, if only slightly. But as I stood before the mirror in satin and lace, staring at a bride who looked radiant yet hollow-eyed, I couldn't shake the truth. The house was full, but not with my people. Downstairs, the rooms shimmered with transformation. White ribbons spiraled around the banisters, lilies and roses bloomed from every vase, and sunlight streamed through the open windows, carrying the sound of children's laughter from the garden. William's family arrived like royalty. His mother, Charlotte, glided through the house in silk and diamonds, her presence commanding but warm. She cupped my hands in hers and said softly, "My dear, you look radiant. You are already one of us." Henry, William's father, followed with a booming laugh and a fatherly hug. "Don't be nervous," he whispered. "This day belongs to you and William." Their kindness soothed me, but also deepened the ache. They were everything my parents weren't: present, supportive, proud. Their acceptance was a gift, yet it underscored the emptiness of my own family's absence. As more guests arrived, college friends, distant cousins, William's colleagues from Chicago, I caught snatches of conversation about business ventures, summer homes, and the grandeur of Michigan Avenue real estate. I glanced down at the simple band on my finger. My heart tugged between pride and a sharp pang of inadequacy. Still, when the time came, I stood tall. The living room had been remade into a chapel, white chairs lined in neat rows, an archway draped in ivy and lilies glowing beneath soft sunlight, camera crews discreetly setting up to capture every moment. It was more elaborate than anything I'd imagined. A fairy tale stage one suddenly felt small upon. Grace gave my hand one last squeeze. "You're ready," she murmured, "and you look like $1 million." I laughed, genuinely, this time, and as the music began, a gentle piano floating through the air, I drew a breath deep enough to carry me down the aisle. For the first time all day, I felt the faint flicker of peace. Maybe my parents had chosen to turn their backs, but I had chosen love, and as I stepped into the sunlight, ready to meet William's gaze, I realized that perhaps this day would be remembered not for who was absent, but for who stood beside me when it mattered most. And I stepped into the living room. The air seemed to shift the moment I crossed the threshold. Every head turned, every breath seemed to pause, and all at once, the weight of 100 gazes fell upon me. Camera flashes burst like fireworks, briefly blinding me, scattering white light across the polished floor. The murmur of conversation faded into a hush that blanketed the room, soft but heavy, like velvet draped over a cage. At the far end of the aisle, beneath the arch of lilies and ivy, William was waiting, his eyes, warm, steady, brimming with a kind of love I'd never dared to believe I deserved, locked onto mine. He looked at me the way no one else ever had, as though I wasn't just the center of this crowded room but the center of his entire world. Something in my chest, tight and aching all morning, loosened just a little. I let my gaze anchor to his, step by careful step. The letter, the sting of Paris, the empty places where my family should have been, it all blurred at the edges of my mind. What mattered was William's smile, the slight tremor of his hand as he reached for mine, and the whispered words that met me when I finally stood before him. "You're here." Simple, but it was enough to steady me. Enough to remind me that I wasn't walking into emptiness, but towards something new. The minister's voice rose, calm and rhythmic, weaving words of promise and devotion into the air. I hardly heard him. The crowd, the flashes, even the camera crews melted into shadows at the edges of my vision. There was only William, his thumb brushing against my fingers, the small quiver in his smile, the warmth of his presence grounding me. When the time came to speak, my voice surprised me. It didn't shake, it didn't falter, it rang out steady, clear, like a bell. "I do." The moment hung in the air. I could almost feel the world tilt, applause rising like thunder, the roar of clapping hands filling the space around us. William kissed me, firm and certain, and for a heartbeat, the loneliness that had haunted me all day vanished. I was not abandoned, I was not small, I was not unseen. I was a bride, stepping into a life I had chosen. Surrounded not by the family I had always dreamed of, but by people who cared enough to be present, and maybe that mattered more. The celebration carried on in a blur of sound and light. The news crew captured every moment, our first dance, the laughter that spilled from the crowd, Charlotte and Henry Turner sweeping me into their arms as though I had always been theirs. Grace beamed from the sidelines, snapping candid photos on her phone, whispering little reminders to breathe, to enjoy, to let myself have this joy. For hours, I was carried by the tide of celebration. The champagne fizzed, the music swelled, the stars began to burn outside the tall windows as evening fell. But when the last dance ended, when the final glass was emptied and the guests began their slow procession to the door, I slipped away. I found myself upstairs again. In the bedroom I had left behind years ago, the pink wallpaper faded, the bookshelf sagging with old paperbacks, the little lamp glowing softly in the corner. I sank onto the bed, my dress pooling around me, satin wrinkled from hours of movement, my feet aching in their jeweled heels. The room smelled faintly of roses from the garden outside, mixed with the faint, sweet dust of memory. For the first time all day, it was quiet. That's when I remembered my phone. I dug it out of the clutch bag I had abandoned earlier, the screen lighting up in my palm, and then I froze. 420 missed calls. The number looked unreal, almost comical, like a glitch in the system, but there it was, scrolling endlessly across the screen, all from the same 3 names: Mom, Dad, Adam. The notifications tumbled endlessly: missed calls, text messages, emails, each more frantic than the last. Subject lines screamed at me in all caps: "Where are you? Call US now. Are you okay?" For a long moment, I couldn't move. It felt as though the past was pounding at my door, desperate to claw its way back in. My parents, who couldn't be bothered to stand in the pews and watch me walk down the aisle, had somehow found the urgency to flood my phone. Finally, I tapped the first voicemail. My mother's voice crackled through, brittle and sharp, trembling with indignation. "You need to call us back right now. We saw the wedding, on television. Of all places, how could you not tell us it would be like this?" Another followed almost immediately. My father this time, his tone clipped and rough. "This isn't funny. Why are you ignoring us? Are you really going to throw your family away like this?" One after another, the messages spilled over me, some angry, some pleading, a few trailing into silence, as though they had run out of words to hurl at me. And then, Adam's voice. Soft, gentle, different. "Hey, sis, I saw you on TV. You looked amazing. I thought it'd just be another boring wedding, but you looked like a movie star." For the first time all day, I laughed, a small, startled laugh that cracked through the heaviness in my chest. Adam, even from across an ocean, still knew how to see me. It was surreal to picture them in Paris, gathered around a glowing hotel television, watching my wedding unfold in real time. My mother, her eyes narrowing as she recognized my dress, my father leaning forward, speechless at the grandeur of the Turner family name, Adam grinning, proud in spite of it all. They hadn't believed me when I tried to explain what my life with William meant. They thought I exaggerated, or worse, fabricated stories to elevate myself. Now they had proof, broadcast live for the world to see. But as I sat there, surrounded by their words, I felt something inside me harden, not with anger, but with clarity. I had spent years bending myself into shapes they would approve of, changing clothes, changing words, changing dreams, hoping one day I would finally be enough for them, and when the day came for me to be celebrated, they had chosen Paris instead. Now they wanted back in, but I wasn't sure I had room for them anymore. The phone buzzed again in my hand, another call, another chance to let them explain, excuse, plead, but I set it face down on the dresser. I didn't owe them my peace. Instead, I let myself drift downstairs and out into the cool night air. The garden was empty now, the lanterns still glowing softly in the trees. Barefoot on the damp grass, I tilted my head back and stared at the stars. William found me there. He slid his arms around me from behind, resting his chin gently on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost afraid of the answer. I thought about it, the letter, the silence, the storm of missed calls, the ache of Adam's voice, the love in William's eyes, and then I realized the truth. "Yes," I whispered, "I am." And for the first time, I meant it. Later, as we drove away from the house that had once been my childhood home, the night spread open before us, the city lights glittering on the horizon. I didn't know if my family would ever stop calling, if Adam would keep reaching for me across the distance, or if one day I'd find the strength to answer. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going back. I had chosen my future, I had chosen love, and for the first time in my life, that was enough.